Would you believe a 9-year-old girl was thrown out of her own home during a raging storm by her stepmother and uncle, just days after her father died? She walked into the night with nothing but a worn-out teddy bear and one haunting question. Why do they hate me so much? But here's the truth few people know. Before his death, her father, Lamine, had left behind a locked wooden box with a trusted friend. Inside was a letter and a video revealing the shocking truth. His own wife and brother were plotting to kill him and steal everything he built. I followed this case closely, from the garage footage and tampered breaks to the courtroom testimony that exposed it all. This story isn't fiction, it's real. And every heartbreaking detail is backed by evidence. In this video, you'll see how a 9-year-old girl stood up in court and exposed the people who betrayed her, how a single man turned blood-stained tragedy into a safe haven for abandoned children, and why just one person believing in you can change your fate forever. Amara, the girl, bravely testified. The video from her father was played in court. The evidence was undeniable. Her stepmother and uncle were sentenced to 5 years in prison. 6 months later, Amara smiled again, calling her rescuer Daddy Kwame, as he rebuilt her childhood home into an orphan sanctuary. If you skip this video, you'll miss one of the most powerful true stories of justice, love, and redemption. Watch till the end, and you'll understand why the courtroom went silent when she said, "They left me to die in the storm." The rain came down like iron rods, sharp and relentless, drumming on the tin roof until the whole house quivered with its fury. Lightning slashed the sky white, and the thunder that followed rolled through the narrow street with the weight of an angry giant. A small girl stumbled barefoot across the slick cement porch, her thin nightdress clinging to her shivering body. Her hair, thick and coiled, stuck in dripping strands to her forehead. Her name was Amara Ndour, and she was 9 years old. The heavy iron gate behind her screeched as it slammed, locked from the inside. The sound echoed in her bones like a verdict being passed. On the other side stood Zuri, the woman who had worn her father's ring after her mother was gone. Zuri's eyes flashed cold in the lightning, lips twisted in disgust. "You're nothing but a burden," she spat, her voice sharp enough to cut through the storm. Beside her loomed Jabari, Amara's own uncle, his broad shoulders blocking the warm glow of the hallway. His hand, rough and impatient, shoved an old canvas bag toward her chest. Inside rattled a few clothes and a broken comb. Clutched to her chest already was a threadbare stuffed bear, seams unraveling, one ear missing. It smelled faintly of her father's cologne, faded now, like a memory dissolving. She staggered back under the weight of the bag, her bare feet sinking in the growing puddles. Rain lashed her face as though the sky itself meant to drive her farther away. "Papa," she screamed, her small voice rising into the storm. She screamed until her throat burned, until the word itself became a prayer broken on her lips. But the only answer was thunder. She pressed the bear tight, its soaked fur scratching her skin. The storm swallowed her whole. Neighbors' windows glowed dim through the curtain of rain. Curtains shifted. A shadow moved. Yet no door opened. No hand reached out. Fear of Zuri's sharp tongue, or perhaps the debt of favors owed to Jabari, kept them silent. She staggered toward the gate again, her fists pounding the metal. Each blow rang hollow. Zuri turned away with a final flick of her shawl. The lock clicked. The last warmth of home vanished behind that iron. The truth struck Amara with the force of lightning itself. She had not been cast out by strangers. The betrayal came from within. Blood that should have protected her had turned into hands that shoved her into the storm. The world tilted beneath her. She clutched the bear until her knuckles went white, until she felt the tiny glass bead inside its belly press against her palm, a secret weight she had never noticed before. She pressed it tighter, desperate for anything solid in a night gone fluid and cruel. The rain thickened, needles piercing her skin. She slid down against the gate, the mud beneath turning to a cold cradle. Her teeth chattered, each breath hitching. In the glow of a lightning strike, her small figure was framed, knees drawn to chest, arms wrapped around that drenched toy, eyes wide with terror. She looked less like a child of 9 and more like a shadow abandoned on the edge of the world. Minutes stretched. Or maybe it was only seconds. Time blurred under the storm. Her mind darted back to the warmth of her father's voice, deep and gentle, calling her little star. The bear in her arms had been his last gift before the accident that stole him away. She could almost hear him whisper against the thunder. Hold on. She buried her face in the bear, hoping to breathe in a memory of him, but only the bitter scent of wet fabric filled her nose. The storm raged louder, whipping the trees until their branches snapped and clattered against rooftops. Somewhere a dog barked frantically, its chain rattling. The gutter water swelled, rolling trash down the street like bones in a flood. Amara shifted, her small frame trembling, toes sinking deeper into the mud. The iron bars at her back were merciless. She thought of running, but where? The world beyond the gate was nothing but darkness and rain. Then, from somewhere down the street, the low hum of an engine broke through the storm. Headlights carved 2 beams through the sheets of water, swinging wide as a vehicle turned the corner. The light swept over the walls, over the puddles, and finally caught her small form against the gate. For an instant she looked like a broken doll discarded in the mud. The vehicle slowed, its tires hissed through the water, stopping a few feet away. The driver's door creaked open. A figure stepped out, a tall man in a dark coat, his umbrella snapping open with a sharp pop. The light from the headlights cut across his face. Broad cheekbones, weary eyes, rain glistening in the lines at their corners. Amara blinked against the brightness, her body too weak to stand. Her arms clutched the bear as if it were breath itself. The man took a step closer, hesitating. His gaze flicked from the shivering child to the locked gate behind her. For a moment, the storm's roar filled the silence between them. His hand tightened on the umbrella handle. Something in his face shifted, as if memory had struck. Amara's lips parted. Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, but it carried through the rain. Papa, then softer. Please. The man froze. That single word cracked open something he had buried long ago. He knew that voice. Not the girl's. He had never met her before. But the echo in it. The echo of a man he once called brother. Lamine Endower, who had pulled him out of poverty years ago, who had given him books, who had believed in him when no one else did. This girl's eyes, dark, wide, filled with terror and stubborn light, were his eyes. The rain poured harder, drumming on the umbrella. The man stepped closer, his shoes sinking in the flooded street. His heart pounded with a truth he hadn't wanted to face. He had heard rumors of Zuri's cruelty, whispers in the market, but he had turned away, afraid of being drawn into family matters too tangled, too dangerous. Now the evidence was here, huddled in the mud, looking at him with the same eyes that had once saved his life. Inside the house, A curtain shifted. A shadow lingered in the window, Zuri watching. The man felt the weight of her gaze even through the storm. To take the child meant stepping into a fire of legal battles, accusations, dangers he was not ready to carry. To leave meant turning his back on the man who had given him everything. The girl's lips moved again. Her words cracked in the rain, fragile and raw. "Don't leave me." The man's breath caught. His hesitation trembled, then broke. The umbrella tilted, covering the girl. His coat came off his shoulders, wrapping her in the smell of rain-soaked wool and faint tobacco. She pressed her face into it, her small body shaking against his chest. For a moment the storm seemed to falter, but from the window above Zuri's face gleamed pale in the lightning. Her eyes narrowed, mouth curved in a smile not of kindness but warning. Amara clung tighter. The stuffed bear slipped slightly, its wet fabric squelching in her hand. The man lifted her carefully, her small limbs stiff with cold. He turned toward the vehicle, his heart a battlefield of fear and duty. As the door shut and the headlights cut forward again, the last thing Amara saw through the rain-smeared glass was the house, her house, its windows glowing with warmth she would never touch again. And in that glow, two silhouettes leaned close, Zuri's hand on Jabari's arm. Their laughter swallowed by thunder. Amara pressed the bear to her chest. Her eyes burned, but no tears came. The storm outside raged, but the storm within her was greater. She did not know where the road ahead would lead, only that her father's world had ended in betrayal, and hers had begun the same way. She closed her eyes, whispering a name into the darkness, not sure if it was prayer or defiance. The sound of it vanished into the hum of tires on wet pavement, leaving the night suspended on the edge of something she could not yet see. The wipers screeched across the windshield, barely keeping pace with the sheets of rain. Headlights cut through the storm in fractured beams, bouncing off puddles and throwing ghostly shapes across the roadside. Inside the car, the air was damp with the smell of wet wool, leather seats, and the faint musk of old tobacco. Amara sat curled against the door, her knees drawn to her chest, the stuffed bear wedged beneath her chin. Every shiver rattled through her bones. Her wide eyes tracked the stranger at the wheel. Kwame Diallo, though she didn't know his name yet, his hands steady, but knuckles pale as he gripped the wheel. The storm roared like it wanted to swallow them whole. Every gust rattled the frame of the old sedan. The man flicked a glance at the girl, his brow tight, lips pressed into a line. He didn't speak at first. His silence carried weight, like he was arguing with voices only he could hear. His coat, draped around her shoulders, smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. She pulled it closer, shrinking into its folds, trying to disappear. He broke the silence at last. "What's your name, child?" His voice was low, hoarse from years of cigarettes and long nights. She licked rainwater from her lips before whispering, "Amara, Amara," he repeated, the syllables lingering. He stared ahead at the streaks of rain on glass. "Where's your father?" Her throat closed. She swallowed hard. "He's gone." The word cracked in the middle. She clutched the bear tighter, as if its worn seams could hold back the truth. The man's jaw flexed. He knew. The whispers in the market. The obituary he had refused to read. Lamine's name carved into cold stone. He pressed harder on the gas, like speed could outrun memory. She turned her face to the window. Water ran down the glass in rivulets, turning the streetlights into streaks of gold and white. Behind them, The house was lost to the dark, but the memory of Zuri's eyes lingered, sharp and glittering with satisfaction as the gate had closed. The man cleared his throat. "I knew your father once, long ago." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Amara's gaze snapped to him, searching. He hesitated, then added, "He helped me when no one else would." Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time since the storm began, something like warmth flickered in her chest. The bear pressed against her cheek. She whispered, "Then your Uncle Kwame." The sound of it cracked through his armor. Uncle, a title he had not earned, yet one her father would have wanted her to say. He tightened his grip on the wheel, his silence saying more than any words. The car slowed at a stoplight, the glow of red bleeding across his face. His eyes shifted to the rear-view mirror. Something caught, two beams of light in the distance, cutting fast through the rain. He frowned, the muscles in his neck taut. For a moment, the storm seemed to hide a pursuer. The lights grew closer, then veered off down another street. He exhaled, but the knot in his chest stayed. Beside them, a neighbor's porch light flickered. A door opened just wide enough for a figure to lean out, phone in hand. The man squinted, rain splattering across the windshield. The glow of the phone screen, reflected in the rain, pointed squarely at the car. The stranger ducked back inside. Kwame's stomach twisted. Already the story of him taking this girl would spread. In the eyes of the law, it could look like abduction. His thoughts churned as the car crawled through the waterlogged streets. He remembered Lamine's voice, rough with laughter, telling him once, "If the day comes when you must stand for what's right, don't think of the cost. Think of the child watching." He gripped the wheel tighter. They turned onto a narrower road lined with shuttered shops. Neon signs sputtered, reflecting across the water like broken stars. At the corner, a man in a raincoat waved frantically, then stepped into the road. Kwame braked hard, tires squealing. The man pulled his hood back, revealing a lined face lit by the street lamp. "You can't take her!" the man shouted over the rain. His voice trembled. "Zuri will call the police. Say you stole her." His hand jerked toward his phone, screen glowing in the storm. Kwame rolled the window down halfway. "And you'll let them believe she belongs to the ones who threw her out?" His tone cut like steel. The man's hand shook. He pulled something from his pocket, his own phone, screen lit with a recording paused mid-frame. He turned it, showing the grainy image, Zuri shoving the girl, Jabari tossing the bag, the iron gate slamming shut. The storm had been their witness, but now here was proof etched in pixels. Quam's chest burned. He stared at the screen, then at the trembling man. "Why show me?" "Because I couldn't live with myself," the neighbor whispered. "She's a child." His eyes dropped, guilt shadowing his face. Then he shoved the phone forward. "Take it. Use it if you must. Just keep her safe." Quam's hand hesitated, then closed over the device. Rain spattered its screen. The neighbor stepped back, hood pulled up again, vanishing into the downpour as quickly as he had appeared. Amara's heart pounded. For the first time that night, she felt a thread of something new, a chance, proof that she wasn't invisible, that someone had seen, even if they were too afraid to act in the moment. Kwame pulled the car into motion again. His thoughts spun with the weight of the phone in his pocket. Evidence, dangerous, yes, but also salvation. The city blurred past in a wash of neon and rain. He guided the car into a quiet neighborhood, older houses with peeling paint and sagging porches. The engine growled low as he pulled into a gravel driveway. The house ahead was small, its porch light flickering weak against the storm. Inside, warmth spilled as the door opened. The smell of old wood and coffee seeped into the night air. Kwame lifted the girl, her body feather-light, and carried her inside. The door shut behind them, muffling the storm. He set her gently on the worn sofa, placing a blanket over her trembling frame. The bear was still clutched in her arms, soaked and heavy. She looked up at him, eyes wide, and whispered, "Please don't send me back." His throat tightened. He crouched down, eye level with her. "You're safe here," he said, though part of him knew safety was fragile, easily shattered by law and lies. He reached into his coat pocket and touched the neighbor's phone. Cold and slick. Proof. But also a target. Amara curled deeper into the blanket, her eyes finally closing. The storm outside still raged, but her breathing slowed, soft and uneven, the sound of a child clinging to sleep after too much terror. Kwame rose, pacing the room. Every creak of the floorboards carried his doubts. To keep her meant opening himself to battles he had avoided for years. To let her go meant betraying the man who had once saved him, and the child who had called him uncle. His gaze fell to the window. The rain streaked down the glass in silver threads. Beyond, a dark shape lingered in the street. A car parked too still, headlights off, watching. His chest clenched. The storm was not the only thing surrounding them. He shut the curtains, heart heavy. Tomorrow, the questions would begin. Police, lawyers, whispers. But tonight, a child had whispered one plea. "Don't leave me." He would carry it, no matter the cost. On the sofa, Amara stirred in her sleep, murmuring something he couldn't hear. Her fingers clenched the bear tighter, pressing it against her heart. For a fleeting moment, her face softened, almost peaceful. Kwame sank into the chair across from her, exhaustion heavy in his bones. He lit a cigarette, the ember glowing in the dim room. Smoke curled, sharp and bitter, mixing with the scent of damp wool. His mind replayed her whisper again and again, louder than the storm outside. "Uncle Kwame, please don't leave me." And though he knew dawn would bring consequences, tonight he closed his eyes and let the weight of her trust settle on his shoulders, heavier than any rain. The night had softened into a gray morning when Amara stirred awake. Her eyes fluttered open to the dim glow of a lamp, its shade cracked, sending jagged beams across the small room. The air smelled of old wood and dust, mixed with the faint bitterness of coffee gone cold. She sat up slowly on the sofa, the blanket slipping down her shoulders, and found herself alone. For a moment, panic spiked in her chest. Another abandonment, another empty space where someone should be. Then she heard it, the scrape of a chair, the faint cough of a man in the next room. She rose, bare feet padding across the creaky floorboards, clutching the bear against her chest. The hallway stretched narrow, walls lined with faded photographs she did not dare to study. Her small hand pushed the door, and it gave way with a soft groan. Inside, Kwame sat hunched at a desk scattered with papers and envelopes. A wooden box rested at the center, its edges worn smooth by years. A small brass key glinted between his fingers. He was staring at it as though it carried the weight of the world. His cigarette had burned down to ash, smoke curling in the stale air. Amara lingered at the doorway, watching. The bear pressed tighter into her chest, damp from yesterday's storm. The sight of the box tugged at something deep inside her. She had seen it before, In a fleeting moment, when her father's belongings were packed away after the funeral, it had been pushed aside, labeled in his handwriting. She whispered, barely audible, "That's Papa's." Kwame flinched, the sound cutting through his thoughts. He turned, his face shadowed with lines of weariness and guilt. "You shouldn't be up yet." She stepped closer, eyes fixed on the box. "Why do you have it?" He looked down at the key in his hand. The memory came back sharp, Lamine pressing it into his palm weeks before the accident, telling him it was for safekeeping. He had locked it away, unwilling to face what might be inside. But now, with the girl here, with last night's storm still in his bones, he could no longer ignore it. He sighed, motioning for her to sit beside him. She perched on the chair's edge, her eyes never leaving the box. Kwame slid the key into the lock, his hand trembling. The metal clicked. For a moment he hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside lay a folded letter, yellowed at the edges, and a small memory card sealed in a plastic envelope. Amara reached first for the letter, her tiny fingers brushing the paper as though it might vanish if she wasn't gentle. The handwriting stopped her breath. Broad strokes she knew by heart, her father's. Kwame unfolded it with care. His voice was low as he read, though every word seemed to echo through the room. "My friend, if you are holding this, it means my fears were not misplaced. Watch over Amara. Do not trust those closest to me, for I believe they plot not only against me but against her." His voice faltered. He looked at the girl whose eyes shimmered in the lamplight, wide and unblinking. He continued, "If anything happens, the truth is in the card." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the girl's uneven breaths. She leaned forward, whispering, "Play it." Kwame reached for a small recorder on the shelf, slid the card in, and pressed the button. The machine whirred. Then a familiar voice filled the room, deep, steady, tinged with fear. Amara's chest constricted. Her father's voice. "If you are hearing this," the recording began, "I may no longer be here. I have seen shadows where there should be trust. Zuri smiles too sweetly. Jabari asks too many questions about my affairs. Last week my brakes failed, though they were serviced the day before. I cannot prove anything yet, but if I am gone, do not let them near my daughter." His tone shifted, softer now. "Amara, my little star, if this ever reaches you, know that I love you beyond this life. Hold tight to the bear I gave you. Inside it, I left something only for you. You will understand when the time comes." Amara gasped, the bear in her arms suddenly heavy, almost foreign. She dug her fingers into its seams, feeling for the lump she had pressed against her palm the night before. Tears streamed down her face as her father's voice played on. The recording ended with static, a hollow hiss that filled the room like grief itself. She buried her face in the bear, her body shaking. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew they would hurt him." Kwam's throat was dry. The memory of Lamine's smile rose before him, but now it was shadowed by suspicion, betrayal, and the weight of a secret he had carried too long. He put a hand on the girl's shoulder, steady but clumsy, like a man unused to comfort. "He tried to protect you," he said. Amara lifted her head, eyes swollen with tears. Then why did no one stop them? The question was small, yet it pierced deeper than any accusation. Kwame had no answer. The silence between them carried all the shame of the years he had looked away. Her gaze dropped back to the bear. She traced its seams, pressing until she felt the hard bead again. She wanted to rip it open, to find whatever her father had hidden. but fear held her back. If she tore it, the last piece of him might be lost. She hugged it tighter instead, rocking slightly as though to steady herself. Kwame turned back to the desk, staring at the letter again. "This changes everything," he muttered. His death. It wasn't chance. The words tasted bitter. He reached for the phone the neighbor had given him, pulling up the grainy video once more. Zuri's hand shoving, Jabari's laughter, the gate slamming. Now paired with Lamine's warning, the pieces began to align. Amara pressed her face into the bear, muffling a sob. Her father's voice still echoed in her ears, warm and protective even in fear. The room felt both safer and more dangerous than anywhere else in the world. Kwame stood abruptly. "We can't stay here. If they know you're with me, they'll come." His eyes burned with urgency, the weight of the box, the letter, the card all pressing on him. Amara looked up, lips trembling. "Where will we go?" He didn't answer right away. His gaze fell on her small hands gripping the bear. In her fragility, he saw the same strength that had carried her father through years of struggle. She was the legacy he had promised to protect. At last he said, "Somewhere safer, somewhere the truth can't be buried." His voice was steady, though his mind raced. He thought of an old friend, a lawyer who owed him favors, someone who might know how to handle evidence this dangerous. Amara rose slowly, still clutching the bear. She followed him down the hallway, each creak of the floorboard sounding like a warning. Outside, the rain had softened to drizzle, but the sky remained heavy with clouds. The world felt suspended, waiting for the next strike. She paused at the door, looking back once. The small lamp still glowed in the room behind them, casting light over the open box. The letter spread wide like wings, and the recorder still hissing faint static. It looked like an altar to a man who had died for truths too heavy to carry alone. Her chest tightened. She whispered under her breath, almost to herself, "Papa, I heard you." The words vanished into the damp morning air. Kwame opened the door, his eyes scanning the street. The car from last night was gone, but he didn't trust the emptiness. He guided her forward, his hand firm on her shoulder. She held the bear like a shield, its hidden weight pressing into her palm, a promise her father had left behind. As they stepped into the gray morning, Amara's heart pounded with fear and fragile hope. The storm had passed, but another one loomed. This one not in the sky, but in the hearts of those who wanted her silenced. She didn't know what waited at the end of the road. She only knew that the bear was heavier than before, and her father's voice was still alive inside her. The door clicked shut behind them. The house, the box, the letter, all left in shadow. The path ahead was uncertain, but it had already begun. The garage stank of oil and rust, the air heavy with smoke from a half-burned cigarette trembling between a mechanic's fingers. Sparks hissed from a welding torch in the corner, each burst, lighting the shadows like a camera flash. Amara shrank closer to Kwame's side, her bear clutched so tight against her chest, the seams creaked. Her wide eyes darted across the walls hung with tools, wrenches, pliers, hooks that looked more like weapons in the dim light. The man they had come to see wiped his hands on a filthy rag, his palms still blackened with grease. His shoulders were broad, his face scarred from years of heat and steel. He looked at Kwame with suspicion, at the child with something like pity, then spat to the side. "You should not have come here." His voice was gravel, low and bitter. Kwame held his ground. "You worked on Jabari's car last month. The mechanic's eyes flicked to the shadowed corner of the garage, then back. And what of it? Amara's heart thudded. She could hear the rain still dripping from the roof, each drop echoing louder than it should. The bear's damp fur scratched her chin. She thought of her father's warning, his voice on the recording, shadows where trust should be. Kwame stepped forward, his voice steady. He asked you questions about brakes, about cutting lines. The mechanic stiffened. The torch hissed again in the background. Someone else working without looking up. The man's jaw worked. He looked at Amara once more, her small body wrapped in fear, and something in his expression cracked. He shoved the rag into his pocket and muttered, he didn't just ask. He wanted to know exactly how to do it, which cable to slice, how to make it look like where. Kwame's chest tightened. And you told him? I told him it was madness. I told him I wanted no part in it. The man's voice rose, then dropped as though he feared the walls might carry sound. But he paid me to replace a brake pad. I didn't ask questions after that. 2 days later, your friend was dead. The words hung heavy. Amara's knees wobbled. Her father's laugh, his warm hand on her shoulder, the scent of his cologne, gone because someone had cut lines like thread. She whispered, barely audible, they killed him. The mechanic's gaze softened for a flicker. I saved the messages, he said, pulling a phone from his back pocket. The screen glowed faintly, lighting his scarred hands. He scrolled, then held it out, text after text. Jabari's number, the questions, the insistence, proof. I didn't delete, couldn't. Something told me it might matter. Kwame reached for the phone, but the man pulled it back. Not like this. You need chain of custody. If I hand it over wrong, it's worthless in court. Amara tilted her head, confused. Kwame's voice turned sharper, professional. Then how? The man's lips pressed thin. Bring a lawyer, one who knows what he's doing. I'll give it proper. And there's more. He gestured toward a shelf stacked with labeled drives. CCTV. The night he came to the garage, he didn't see the camera in the corner. It's all there. Him talking, his face, his gestures. You get someone official, and I'll hand it over. Kwame exhaled, relief and dread tangling. It was more than he had hoped for. Too much, maybe. Sekou Abiola, he murmured, half to himself. The mechanic nodded once, then lowered his voice. You didn't hear it from me. I've got a family. If he knows I spoke, they'll burn me out. His eyes shifted to the shadows again, as though Jabari's reach stretched even here. Kwame's hand rested briefly on the man's shoulder. You've done enough. The mechanic shook him off, retreating to his torch, muttering curses to hide his fear. They stepped out into the drizzle. The air was heavy with the metallic tang of rain on iron. Amara clutched Kwame's hand now, the bear squashed between them. She was trembling, but not from cold. Her mind replayed the words, brake lines, accident, proof. Each syllable pressed deeper like nails. They walked in silence until they reached the car. Kwame unlocked it, guiding her inside, then paused before turning the key. His jaw clenched. We're not alone in this anymore, he said quietly. Amara hugged the bear, staring at his reflection in the rain-streaked window. They won't stop, will they? He met her gaze in the glass, eyes weary. Not until we stop them first. The engine growled to life. Tires splashed through puddles, carrying them back toward the city's spine. The streets glistened with light, neon and rain blending into rivers of color. The air inside the car was thick, Amara's breath fogging the window. She traced a small circle with her finger, then whispered, Papa tried to warn us. Kwame didn't answer. His focus was locked ahead, but his silence was confirmation. When they arrived at the office of Sekou Abiola, the night had deepened. The lawyer's building was old stone, its windows glowing with the warm light of lamps burning late. Inside, the scent of leather and old paper wrapped around them. Shelves bowed under the weight of books. A clock ticked with deliberate patience. Sekou himself emerged from behind a desk, tall and lean, with eyes sharp as broken glass. His suit was rumpled, his tie loosened, but authority clung to him like armor. He looked at Kwame first, then at the girl half hidden behind him. His gaze softened a fraction, then hardened again. "Tell me everything," he said. Kwame set the neighbor's phone, the letter, and the memory card on the desk. He spoke with precision, every detail laid bare. Amara sat silent, her bear pressed under her chin, watching Sekou's eyes move across the evidence. When Kwame finished, Sekou leaned back, fingers steepled. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. "If what you say is true, this is not negligence. This is murder," Amara's breath hitched. The word hung in the air like a blade. Sekou rose, pacing to a cabinet. He pulled out a stack of forms, his voice clipped. "Chain of custody. Every piece must be documented, logged, sealed. If you mishandle even once, they'll tear it apart in court." He slid a form across the desk. "Sign here. From this moment, the evidence belongs to the law." Kwam's hand shook as he signed. He had lived years avoiding entanglements, but now the ink bound him to a war he couldn't escape. Sekou turned to Amara. His voice softened, though his words carried weight. "Do you understand what this means? To speak, to testify, to face them." Her fingers dug into the bear, pressing the hidden bead her father had mentioned. She lifted her eyes, red-rimmed but steady. "They left me in the storm," she whispered. "I won't let them hide anymore." Silence followed. Sekou studied her, then nodded once. "Your father would be proud." The room dimmed as clouds swallowed the moon. A siren wailed faint in the distance. The clock ticked on, indifferent. But in that small office, a line had been crossed. Proof had shifted from whispers to weapons. Amara sat back, her chest heavy. On the desk lay the signed forms, the sealed bag holding her father's last words, the phone glowing faintly with the image of betrayal. She reached for the bear, burying her face in its damp fur. In the hollow of its body, she felt the secret weight, a reminder that her father was still guiding her. Her voice trembled into the silence. "Papa, they killed you!" The words landed with finality. Not just grief, but a vow. Her small shoulders shook, but her eyes did not waver. Kwame placed a hand on her back. Sekou, for all his steel, looked away, as though the sight pierced deeper than any case he had ever fought. The clock struck the hour. Outside, the rain began again, heavier this time, hammering the windows like fists. Inside, the girl's whisper echoed still, a truth spoken into the storm that would not be silenced. The man's hands shook so hard the stack of papers nearly slipped from his grip. Fluorescent light flickered overhead, buzzing like an insect, throwing his gaunt face into harsh relief. He stood in the doorway of Sekou Abiola's office, rain dripping from the hem of his coat, eyes darting as if every corner of the room might hide someone listening. His knuckles were pale around the folder clutched to his chest. Kwame rose at once, his chair scraping against the hardwood. Amara flinched at the sound, pulling her bear tighter. She sat near the window, where the night pressed against the glass like a watchful predator. The man didn't step further until Seiko himself leaned forward, voice calm but edged. You came. That means your conscience finally won. The man swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. I can't carry it anymore. He laid the folder on the desk with trembling hands. They paid me, Jabari, Zuri, to falsify land transfer records, to move everything into her name before Lamine was even buried. His voice cracked on the last word, shame choking him. Seiko's eyes narrowed. He opened the folder with slow, deliberate movements, as though unveiling evidence in court. Inside lay deeds, bank slips, digital printouts, and a slim flash drive taped to the corner. The air in the room thickened with the smell of damp paper and cigarette smoke. Amara's heart pounded. She crept closer, her small fingers grazing the back of Kwame's sleeve. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Don't trust those closest to me. The words seemed to pulse from every page of the folder. The man wiped sweat from his brow. They thought no one would look closely. They said grief blinds eyes, that no one would question. But I forged the seals. I changed the signatures. I sold my soul for their money. His shoulders slumped, as if the weight of his confession pressed him to the floor. Seiku's jaw clenched. He lifted a sheet, running his finger over the digital signature, then pulled another from beneath it. He compared them side by side, the inked loops, the timestamp, the inconsistencies. They betrayed the truth. He slid them aside and pressed the flash drive into his laptop. A click, a hum, then a file appeared. The room filled with the tinny sound of voices captured on tape. Jabari's rough drawl, sharp and impatient. Make it quick. We want it airtight. Then Zuri's smooth tone, dripping with honey that barely masked steel. The house, the accounts, everything. No loose ends. The child will not matter once it's ours. Amara gasped, hands flying to her mouth. The stuffed bear slipped and dangled from her arm. Her body went rigid, as if the voices themselves were fingers closing around her throat. Kwame's face hardened, his fists curling on the table. Seiku's pen scratched across paper as he documented. Every detail entered with clinical precision. The man who had brought the evidence buried his face in his hands, his words muffled through his palms. I knew it was wrong. I knew. But when a man like Jabari leans over your desk and smiles like that, you do what he says, or you disappear. Quam's voice was low, dangerous. And now, the man looked up, eyes bloodshot, wet with tears. Now I give it to you. Do what must be done. But if they find out... He trailed off, shaking his head. Fear spread across his face like oil on water. Seiku shut the laptop with a click that echoed like a gavel. You've done enough. From here the law will carry it. His voice was iron, yet Amara could hear the strain beneath. The man nodded, backing toward the door as though chased by unseen hands. He slipped out into the hall, his footsteps fading. The silence he left behind was heavier than his presence had been. Amara stood frozen, staring at the papers. Each line, each stamp was another nail in the coffin of her father's stolen life. She whispered, voice trembling but fierce. They didn't just hurt him. They wanted everything. Seiko's gaze settled on her, sharp but not unkind. And now the truth belongs to us. The question is, can we carry it into the light without being crushed? Kwame placed a hand on Amara's shoulder. The weight of it was steady, grounding. She leaned into it, eyes blazing through the tears. Papa's truth will save us, she said, clutching the bear tight against her chest again. The words trembled, but they held something stronger than fear. Seiko's lips pressed into a thin line. He tucked the folder into a sealed envelope, signed across the tape, then locked it in his cabinet. The key clicked, final and cold. Then we prepare. When the day comes, every lie will break beneath this. Amara's eyes lingered on the locked drawer. She imagined her father's voice caught inside, waiting to be released. Her small body quivered, but not with weakness. It was the tremor of a child who had seen the storm and still dared to stand. Kwame extinguished his cigarette, the ember dying with a hiss. They've taken enough. It ends now. But outside the office, beyond the lamplight, the city pulsed with secrets. Shadows shifted, whispers traveled, and somewhere in the darkness Zuri and Jabari would already be plotting their next move. Amara pressed her forehead to the bear's damp fur, breathing in the faint ghost of her father's scent. For the first time since the night of the storm, her tears slowed. The truth was no longer a hidden burden. It was a weapon. Yet weapons cut both ways. She looked up at Kwame, her voice so soft he almost didn't hear. Will it be enough? He hesitated. The silence stretched, filled only by the ticking of Seiko's clock. Then he whispered back, It has to be. The weight of those words settled over the room, like the storm returning. And as Amara closed her eyes, the image of her father's face flickered in the darkness, urging her forward into battles she could not yet imagine. The dream broke open like a door in a storm. He stepped out of the dark as if he had been waiting there all along, rainlight shimmering on his shoulders, the kind eyes she knew by heart holding steady. His hand came down to her small shoulder, warm, solid, the kind of touch that anchors a life. Be strong, my daughter. The words weren't spoken so much as breathed into her, a low thrum in her bones, a reminder and a command in the same note. She tried to answer, but thunder rolled across the ceiling of the dream and tugged her awake. She surfaced into night. The house hummed softly. Refrigerator, a faint pipe rattle, the steady tick of a kitchen clock. Shadows pooled in corners. A thin draft slipped under the door and brushed her bare ankles. She lay still on the sofa, the blanket rough under her chin, the stuffed bear pinned to her chest. Its fur was dry now, but its cotton held the memory of rain. Beneath the stitched belly, that hard little bead pressed against her palm. She felt for it like a secret pulse. I'm here, Papa. I heard you. In the next room, Paper whispered. A drawer slid. A man cleared his throat and tried to make it sound like nothing. Kwame had been moving like that for hours, quiet, careful, carrying a weight he did not want her to see. The lamp on his desk cast an oval of amber light. Inside it, documents lay like tiles in an ancient pattern. Names, dates, signatures, seals that caught the light with faint metallic ridges. He checked them again, then again. A thin slice of cigarette smoke ribboned the air. Though the ashtray had been emptied twice, outside the street kept its own breath. Somewhere, a taxi coughed and moved on. A dog barked once, then thought better of it. Tires hissed far away. Closer, right under the living room window, a parked engine idled with a low, patient growl. It came and went through the night like a tide. She didn't need to see it to know it was there. She felt it through the floorboards, a faint tremor in the soles of her feet. The hair on her arms lifted. She pulled the blanket up and listened until the growl faded, then returned, then faded again. The world was circling. She sat up. The blanket slid to her lap. The room smelled of wool and coffee, a trace of cedar from Kwame's coat. She padded to the doorway and watched him. He didn't notice her at first. His attention was snagged on a white page that carried a raised seal and a judge's looping signature in blue. When he finally looked over, his eyes softened. He didn't smile. Not with the night listening. "You should try to sleep," he said, keeping his voice low. "I saw him," she whispered. "He told me to be strong." Kwame looked down. His hand touched the page with the seal. "He never asked anything easy," he murmured. Then he seemed to remember where they were. He straightened, slid the page into a clear sleeve, and locked it in the case on the desk. The click of the lock sounded too loud. He winced. The clock ticked on. The house breathed. She stood there with the bear tucked under her chin, staring at the case. He followed her gaze and nodded. "It's what we need to stand in the morning," he said. "It says you are safe here. It says I hold you until the court decides, not them." He didn't say their names. He didn't need to. A soft knock broke the air. She flinched. The bear bit into her ribs. Kwame's jaw set. He glanced at the time. Too late for neighbors. Too late for anything good. Another knock came, sweet and polite, as if a friend had dropped by to return a borrowed book. He crossed the room and stood to the side of the front door, body blocking the lock without touching it. "Who is it?" A voice floated through the wood, smoothed with honey. "It's me. I'm here to make things right." The bear went colder in her arms. The scent reached her first through the door frame, perfume with a clean, bitter edge, like flowers drained of their color and bottled with bleach. Kwame didn't move. "There's nothing for you here. On the contrary," the voice purred. "Everything that is mine is here." The latch turned, testing. The chain held. A pause, then a laugh, soft and incredulous. "Really, Kwame? Chains?" He took a breath, turned the deadbolt, and opened the door the width the chain allowed. Rain whispered against the porch, beads clinging to the metal railing, gathering and falling like seconds. Zuri stood in a neat coat, hair pinned flawless, lipstick the exact color of ripened plums. Behind the mask of careful sorrow, her eyes glittered hard. She lifted a hand. The rings winked. "I came to apologize," she said, voice pitched low, meant to soothe. "The other night got out of hand. We were grieving. We said things we didn't mean. We need to end this." She tilted her head, peering past him. "Amara, my sweet, are you there?" The girl didn't speak. She watched from the edge of the light, a small figure wrapped in the blanket, the bear like a shield. Zuri pressed her fingertips to her chest in an imitation of sorrow. "I brought something for you." She reached into her bag and drew out a small velvet pouch. A tiny gold pendant spilled into her palm, a heart no bigger than a teardrop. "Your father would have wanted you to have it. You weren't there when he wanted anything," the girl thought, but she said nothing. The pendant caught the hall light and threw a false star on Zuri's wrist. Kwam's voice stayed even. "You should go." Zuri's gaze slid back to him, warm light gone from her eyes. "You've always fancied yourself a man of principle," she said, and the sweetness cracked just enough to show the blade inside. "But you're not a father. You're not family. You are a complication, and complications get resolved." The engine outside idled again. A car door thunked shut somewhere down the block. The night leaned closer. Zuri leaned too. The chain lifted tight, as if it were all that kept her from stepping into their air. The perfume swelled, and beneath it something metallic, like fresh coins. "Listen to me, little one," she said, and for a moment her face arranged itself into concern so perfect it might have fooled a stranger. This man will bring trouble to your doorstep. He will say he is saving you and then lose you by accident. Papers go missing. People misplace children. Accidents happen on the way to court. You don't want that, do you? Come with me, now, quietly. I'll make sure no one gets hurt. The blanket scratched the girl's chin. The bear nudged her wrist. The little bead under its skin felt suddenly hotter. She lifted her chin and met Zuri's eyes. You left me in the rain, she said, the words thin but steady. You left me to the thunder. For the first time, Zuri's mouth lost its shape. A crack crossed the plum color. Her eyes cut back to Kwame. You have an hour, she said softly, like someone ordering tea. Then the world will knock harder than I just did. She slid the pendant back into her purse without looking, snapped it shut, and turned. Rain welcomed her coat like a second skin. By the time the chain dropped and the door clicked closed, her perfume was already fading into the house's older smells, leaving behind only the shape of the threat. Kwame stood still, hand on the bolt, eyes on the wood as if he could see through it. He counted to 10 under his breath and then double locked. He drew the curtains closed and checked the back door, the kitchen window latch, the spare key under the plant pot. He moved it to the drawer. When he came back, his face was all edges. You saw her mouth, he said. I heard her, the girl said. He nodded as if that settled a ledger. He picked up his phone, thumbed it awake, sent a message. She came, warned, likely to move tonight. Papers ready? Then he dialed. It rang too long. He hung up, typed again, and waited. The reply came in a minute. I'm en route. Sit tight. Do not open the door again. He exhaled. He pushed the desk case closer to his chair, the translucent plastic making a ghost of the judge's signature. The clock murmured its soft arithmetic. The engine outside idled longer, then stilled. The dark thickened as if something were holding a breath. The knock that came next did not pretend to be kind. Fists hammered wood. A second set of knuckles. A voice calling, firm, unhurried, amplified by authority. Child Protective Services, open the door. Every muscle in the girl's back went tight. The bear slid under her chin. Kwame stood. He didn't look at her. He looked at the case. Then he looked at the door. Stay where I can see you, he said. He slid the chain, opened to the latch. 2 figures stood in the porch's thin light. A woman with a badge clipped to her collar, hair in a tight bun, rain beating on her coat. Beside her, a uniformed officer, hat brim dripping, hand near his belt but not on it. Behind them, the night flashed red and blue in pulses that turned the hallway into a low tide of color. We received a report of unlawful custody of a minor, the woman said. Her voice was precise. She had said this sentence in many doorways. We need to see the child and speak with you both. Who reported it? Kwame asked. She didn't answer. She looked over his shoulder. Sir, we need to verify welfare. She's safe, he said, and moved his body just enough so their sightline fell to the girl. The woman's gaze touched the blanket, the small face above it, the bear. The girl's cheeks were pale but dry. Her hair was combed. The living room was clean. These small things mattered, and the woman saw them. Step aside, the officer said, a notch sharper. His eyes flicked to the corners, the baseboards, the places where neglect likes to hide. Kwame breathed once, twice. Then he opened the door and backed away, keeping his hands visible and his voice calm. You will want to see this first, he said, and he lifted the case onto the table where the hall light poured down. He clicked it open. The paper inside glowed a little. Ink and seal and signature raised with tiny ridges the fingers can feel. "This order was issued this afternoon by family court," he said, the words dry as stone. "It names me as temporary guardian until the hearing. Case number here. Judge's name here. If you call the clerk, you can verify within minutes." The woman stepped forward. She did not sit. She did not smile. She took the page without taking it, eyes scanning, fingers hovering over the embossed seal. The officer shifted from one foot to the other and looked at the girl again. The red-blue tide kept rinsing the wall. "Do you have identification, sir?" the woman asked. He handed over his card and driver's license. She glanced once, then let the officer take them so she could look at the case again. "Any other children in the home?" she asked without looking up. "No," he said, and then, because he knew how these questions moved, "Food in the kitchen, clean water. She's bathed and clothed and not in danger. We have documented evidence of abuse at the prior residence. You'll give me copies," she said. "I'll give you better," a voice answered from the doorway, warm and dry as a courtroom at noon. Sekou stepped in out of the rain, shedding a fine mist from his coat, a folder tucked under his arm. He had to push past the officer without making it a push, and somehow he did. He nodded to the woman. "Evening. Counselor Abiola. I filed the order you're reading and notified your office at 6:13 p.m. I have stamped copies for you, as well as a log of evidence regarding prior harm to the child. You can call the magistrate's after-hours line. The clerk on duty is expecting your call." The woman studied him. Something in her posture loosened. Not trust, but a recognition that the ground under her feet was not quicksand. "We still need to see the child alone," she said carefully, "and we need to inspect." "You'll see her," Sekou said steady, "and you'll speak with her with me present until you call the clerk. Then you can take all the time you need." His tone made room for dignity without ceding an inch of law. The woman flicked her gaze to the officer. A nod passed between them. She crouched, so she was level with the girl. Her eyes were not cold. "My name is Teresa," she said. "I make sure children are safe. Can you tell me how you feel right now?" The girl tightened her hold on the bear. She could smell the woman's raincoat, synthetic and damp, and the clean soap on her hands. She searched the woman's face for anything that looked like Zuri and found none. "I'm scared," she said. "Truth is a clean blade. But I'm safer here." "Were you hurt?" Teresa asked, softer. The bear's bead pressed hard against the girl's palm, as if answering for her. "They left me outside in the storm," she said, the words scraping her throat as they came. "They locked the gate." Her voice dissolved at the end and reassembled itself. "He brought me inside." Teresa's eyes shifted up to Kwame and down again. "Do you want to stay here tonight?" The girl's answer was immediate. "Yes." The officer cleared his throat. "We still need to verify the order," he said, but his stance had shifted a step away from confrontation. "Call," Sekou said, offering a card with a handwritten number. "Ask for the clerk by name." Then he set the folder on the table, opened it so the top sheet showed a timeline with signatures, and pulled out a flash drive in a labeled bag. "Chain of custody," he said mildly. "We're not throwing words around, officer. We're doing them." Teresa stepped away to make the call. In the narrow hallway, her voice lowered, then lowered again. Silence grew teeth. The red-blue tide slowed and cooled to ordinary lamplight. The officer let his shoulders back down his spine and studied the baseboards, as if they might have an opinion. The girl watched everything. The way Kwame stayed close but didn't touch. The way Sekou put his hands in his pockets so they would not look like fists. The rain making commas on the porch. The tiny sheen on the raised court seal. Details were anchors. If she counted enough of them, she would not float away. Teresa came back with the phone against her chest and a different look in her eyes. "The order stands," she said. "No triumph, just fact." She met the girl's gaze again. "We'll schedule a visit tomorrow after the hearing. Tonight you stay here." The officer handed back the identification. "We'll be outside for a bit," he said, not quite apologizing for the red-blue tide. "Paperwork." When the door closed behind them, the house sighed. Not relief, not yet, but the air lost a knot. Sekou exhaled and loosened his tie as if the room had warmed 5 degrees. "They moved faster than I thought," he said, "which means they're running scared." Kwame rubbed a hand over his face. The stubble rasped. "She came first," he said, "to warn." Sekou's mouth tugged into a line that smiled without joy. "That wasn't a warning," he said. "That was insurance. She needed to see your eyes before she placed her bet." He patted the case with the court order, the seal winking up at him. She bet wrong. The girl did not speak. She sank onto the sofa and pulled the blanket up over her knees. The bear sat on her lap like a patient creature. She dug her fingers into the seam at its belly, feeling the hidden bead give slightly under pressure. She thought of the recording again, her father's voice telling her to hold tight. Inside it, "I left something only for you. You will understand when the time comes." The time pressed close now, so close she could taste it, sharp and metallic and clean, like the air before rain. Through the curtains, the red-blue glow faded, leaving only the streetlight's thin halo. Somewhere down the block, a car door clicked, and tires rolled away. The engine that had idled all night did not return. For a minute, all she could hear was the clock and 3 people breathing. Sekou gathered the remaining papers, stacking them like a wall. He glanced at the girl and then at the closed door. "Get rest if you can," he said. "Morning is a narrow bridge. Cross it with both eyes open." Kwame nodded. He turned off the desk lamp. The room fell into a softer dark. He stood in the doorway as if he could keep all danger from crossing it by will alone. Long seconds passed before he leaned his shoulder to the frame and let himself breathe like a man again. The girl lay back. The sofa springs sang their tired note. She tucked the bear under her chin and let the blanket find her shoulders. Her eyelids were heavy, but sleep did not come at once. The house seemed to expand and contract around her, the way a chest does as it waits for grief to ease. She closed her eyes and saw again her father stepping out of the dark. "Be strong, my daughter." The words vibrated down the length of her bones. Her throat tightened. She swallowed. She touched the bear's seam with the tip of a fingernail and then pulled her hand away, afraid to break the last thing he had touched. Not tonight. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she would carry it in her arms into a room full of strangers and lights and laws. Tomorrow she would put her small feet on the floor of that room and speak out loud so that his name could be heard by more than dreams. Her lips moved against the bear's ear. Her voice was a breath, a thread, a promise tied to the quiet that followed the sirens. "Tomorrow, I will speak." The gavel cracked once, sharp as lightning, and the crowded courtroom held its breath. The walls seemed to lean in with the weight of silence. Every bench was filled, the air hot with the mix of sweat, perfume, ink, and expectation. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, washing faces pale, but all eyes were on the small figure rising from the witness chair. Amara's knees wobbled as she stood, the hem of her dress brushing the polished wood floor. She gripped the stuffed bear in one hand, its stitched belly pressed against her ribs, and lifted her chin. Her eyes caught the reflection of the overhead lights on the judge's glasses, the way they glowed like twin suns. She felt the tightness of 100 gazes on her skin, a heat greater than the lamps. But beneath it all, her father's voice whispered again, "Be strong." The clerk swore her in, words that tasted like ash as she repeated them. Her small voice barely carried at first. Then Sekou stepped forward, his dark suit folding into the light, his presence filling the room like a shield. His question was simple. "Amara, can you tell us what happened the night you were left outside?" She clutched the bear tighter, its damp scent rising again in memory. Her lips parted. "They threw me out," she said, the words rough but clear. "They locked the gate. It was raining. I called for my papa, but no one came, only thunder." A murmur rippled through the benches. Reporters leaned forward. Zuri shifted in her seat at the defense table, her silk scarf immaculate, her lipstick perfect. Beside her, Jabari's jaw was tight, his fingers drumming once against the table before he caught himself. The judge raised a hand and the murmur died. Amara's gaze moved to Sekou, who nodded once. She found strength in that small motion and pushed on. "I begged them. They said I was nothing but trouble. They left me to die." Her voice cracked on the last word, and in that crack, the courtroom felt the storm she carried. Sekou let the silence breathe before he turned to the bench. "Your Honor, the child's words align with the evidence we now present." He motioned, and the screen behind him flickered to life. The grainy image of the neighbor's door camera filled it, Zuri's hand on the girl's shoulder. The shove, Jabari tossing the bag, the gate slamming with metallic finality. Gasps echoed. Zuri's face remained calm, but her knuckles whitened around her scarf. Jabari shifted again, his lawyer whispering urgently into his ear. Then Sekou's voice cut through. But that was not the only warning. Before his death, Lamine Endower left behind his own testimony. He lifted the flash drive with the chain of custody seal intact. The clerk plugged it in, and the speakers hissed alive. Lamine's voice filled the room, deep and steady even in fear. "If you are hearing this, I may already be gone. My wife and brother plot against me. If I die suddenly, know it was not chance. Protect Amara." The words hung heavy, echoing against the walls. Amara's hand flew to her mouth. Even though she had heard it before, the sound of his voice in this crowded chamber cut deeper, sharper, like he had returned just long enough to stand beside her. She pressed her face into the bear, trembling, but she did not look away. The defense scrambled. Zuri's lawyer rose, voice sharp. "Objection. The tape cannot be verified," but Sekou was ready. He lifted another folder. Chain of custody. Signed, sealed, verified by the forensic unit. The voice print matches. The court has all it needs. The judge's eyes glinted behind the glasses, but he said nothing, only gestured for the proceedings to continue. Then the unexpected broke open. The clerk of court entered with a new file, handed it to the bailiff, who delivered it to the bench. The judge scanned it, brows tightening, then lifted his gaze to the room. "We have received additional evidence from traffic control. Surveillance footage from the night of the accident." The screen lit again. This time blurry highway footage, headlights streaking through rain, a car speeding, another close behind, too close. Jabari's vehicle, identified by license, tailing Lamine's until the moment the frame froze at the curve where the crash had happened. The air in the courtroom split into gasps again. Amara's small hand reached for Seku's sleeve. Her eyes glistened with horror and vindication all at once. He bent just enough to whisper, "Truth always leaves footprints." The defense stammered. Jabari's lawyer tried to argue interference, misidentification, but his words stumbled against the glow of the footage. Jabari himself had gone pale, his lips pressed thin. Then Seku called the mechanic, who walked in with oil still under his nails, a reluctant but resolute witness. He told of Jabari's questions, the way he had asked about brake lines, about making failure look natural. He held up his phone with the saved messages, screen glowing like a lantern in the dim. The jury watched, faces tightening, their pens scratching. Finally, Seku summoned the land office clerk. The man trembled as he walked, his folder clutched like a lifeline. He confessed before all, yes, he had taken money, yes, he had altered signatures, yes, Zuri and Jabari had pressed him to erase Lamine from his own house before the soil over his grave had dried. His voice cracked with shame, but the truth spilled and would not be stopped. Through it all, Amara stood straighter, her shoulders still small, her hands still shaking, but her voice clearer now, each word striking like rain on iron. She told them of hunger, of blows, of nights locked in silence, and of the storm that nearly swallowed her whole. "They wanted me gone," she whispered, "but my papa left me his voice, and now you can hear it too." The room was silent save for the faint buzz of the lights. Even the judge's pen stilled. Seku closed his folder, his eyes sweeping the jury. The pattern is clear: abuse, fraud, attempted murder, and a child left to drown in thunder. The law demands we answer. The judge nodded once, the motion heavy. The court will recess for deliberation. The gavel struck again, echoing like a gunshot in the silence. The jurors filed out, faces unreadable, papers clutched in careful hands. The defense whispered furiously at their table, Zuri's composure cracking at the edges. Jabari's shoulders hunched like stone. Amara sank back into her chair. The bear was wet again, but this time from her tears. She lifted her face, eyes blurred, and whispered only to herself, "Papa, they heard you." The sound of her words lingered in the air, more powerful than the gavel, more fragile than thunder. The room sat in stillness, the whole city holding its breath for the judgment yet to come. The courtroom was already full when the judge returned, robe sweeping, gavel raised. The murmur of voices died at once, leaving only the faint hum of the ceiling fans and the nervous rustle of papers. Amara's chest ached with each beat of her heart. She sat clutching her bear, the threadbare fur pressed against her cheek, the little bead inside reminding her of her father's voice and warning. Across the aisle, Zuri adjusted her scarf with delicate fingers, her face unreadable. Jabari sat stone still, jaw tight, eyes darting between the jury box and the judge's hand hovering over the gavel. The silence cracked. This court finds the defendants, Zuri Ndor and Jabari Ndor, guilty on all counts: child abuse, fraud, falsification of legal documents, and conspiracy to commit murder. The gavel slammed down once, the sound reverberating like thunder. Gasps rippled through the benches. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens racing across pages. Amara's world spun. She blinked, wide-eyed, unsure if she had heard right. Then the words sank deep, and her tears came hot and fast. She gripped the bear tighter. Beside her, Kwame's hand rested firm on her shoulder. She looked up into his face and saw tears glisten in the corners of his eyes. Sekou leaned forward, his jaw firm, his eyes never leaving the bench as though holding the moment steady. The judge continued. The sentence is 5 years imprisonment each, with no possibility of parole. Custody of Amara Ndour is hereby awarded to Kwame Diallo, acting under the guardianship petition supported by the court and the late Lamine Ndour's testament. For the first time, Zuri's mask slipped. A crack appeared, sharp as glass, her lips tightening as if she had swallowed bitterness. Jabari cursed under his breath, barely audible, before his lawyer pressed a warning hand against his arm. Amara couldn't contain herself. She bolted from her seat, small feet slapping against the polished floor, and threw herself into Kwame's arms. He caught her mid-stride, lifting her, holding her as though she were made of both light and stone. Her sobs shook them both. "Daddy Kwame," she cried against his chest, the words spilling without her realizing. He closed his eyes, lips pressing to her hair, his own tears falling silently. Around them the courtroom clattered with the sound of gavel, chairs scraping, voices rising. But for them, the noise dissolved. There was only the heartbeat pressed against her ear, steady as an anchor in the storm. Months passed. The house that had once stood silent with grief opened its doors again. The curtains were drawn wide, letting in sunlight that painted golden squares on the wooden floors. Children's laughter floated through the halls, bright and echoing. The smell of fresh bread and chalk dust mingled in the air. Where once shadows had clung, now voices filled every room. Kwame stood at the threshold of the renovated home, watching as a group of children ran down the hallway, their laughter rattling the walls. Some were orphans, some abandoned, some simply needing a place to feel safe. The place was no longer just a house. It was becoming a refuge. The sign above the gate had been painted carefully. The House of Light. Amara led the group, her dress swinging, her laughter ringing brighter than the rest. She carried her bear still, its seams patched now, but the bead inside remained. She stopped at the window, gazing at the sunlight splintering across the floor. She lifted the bear and whispered, "Papa, look, it's not empty anymore." Kwame stepped behind her, his hand resting lightly on her back. His gaze followed hers, seeing the same sunlight, but also the memories of darker days. He exhaled, long and deep. He would be proud, he said softly. Sekou visited often, bringing books, food, advice, sometimes just his silent presence. He stood in the corner that day, watching the children scrawl their names on paper with stubby pencils. Each name etched into a notebook was another act of defiance against silence, another declaration that they existed, that they mattered. But even in the warmth of transformation, shadows lingered. One evening, as Kwame locked the gate, a letter slipped under the door. No return address, no signature, just typed words on plain paper. "This is not over. We have long memories." Kwame folded it without a word, tucking it into his coat pocket. He did not show Amara. Some truths needed to wait until she was ready. For now, she needed laughter more than warnings. The twist was not in their victory, but in the reminder that victory never erased danger completely. Darkness could return, but they had built something stronger, light that refused to dim. On the 6th month, the first official day of the House of Light, the doors opened to the community. Elders who once gossiped now brought baskets of fruit. Teachers came with notebooks. Neighbors who had watched silently that stormy night now arrived with offerings, their shame turning to participation. Amara stood on the steps, bear tucked under her arm, eyes bright, She looked down at the crowd, then up at Kwame. "Do you think he can see us?" Kwame nodded, his throat too tight to speak. She raised the bear high above her head, the sun catching its worn button eye. "Then this is for him," she said, her voice ringing clear. Applause burst from the crowd. Not polite, not tentative, but full. Children ran past her into the house, their laughter rising like a hymn. Amara closed her eyes, and for a moment she swore she felt her father's hand again on her shoulder, warm and steady. But the point of deepest emotion came later, when the guests had gone and night had crept back. Amara walked through the hall, the lamps casting soft circles of light. She stopped in the center, where the air still carried faint echoes of thunder from the past. She placed the bear on the table and pressed her lips against its patched fur. "Papa," she whispered, "we're home now." The silence that answered was not empty. It was full of memory, full of promise. She felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were not only sorrow. They were a river carrying grief toward something greater. The house was no longer haunted. It breathed with life, with voices, with the promise that truth had survived. Yet as Amara closed her eyes, the letter Kwame had hidden burned quietly in his pocket. Its warning coiled like a shadow waiting for its hour. The night deepened. Outside, the street lamp flickered, casting long fingers of light across the gate. Inside, the bear sat on the table, its bead pressing quietly inside, the last secret of a father who had seen danger coming. Amara curled into Kwame's side, her hand in his, her voice a whisper, half asleep. "We're safe, right?" Kwame didn't answer immediately. He kissed her hair, pulling her closer. His silence carried both yes and no, both peace and vigilance. The lamp flickered again. The house of light stood tall against the dark, but the dark was not finished. And as the girl drifted to sleep with a smile, the story left the night open, a question trembling in the air. Would the light be enough when the shadows returned? When all storms pass, what remains is not the sound of thunder or the sting of rain, but the quiet resilience of those who endured. At the heart of every trial lies the possibility of renewal, and within every wound, the chance for light to grow. Life has always balanced itself between betrayal and trust, cruelty and compassion, despair and hope. Yet it is hope that carries forward, hope that transforms silence into song, and grief into a promise that tomorrow will be better than today. There are moments when the world seems merciless, when injustice tightens its grip and shadows grow longer. But no darkness, however deep, can last forever. Truth has a way of surfacing, like a seed pushing stubbornly through stone. Kindness has a way of multiplying, passing from hand to hand until even the most fragile soul finds shelter. And love, quiet, unassuming, steady, remains the force that stitches broken lives back together. What this journey tells us is that every voice matters, no matter how small. Every act of courage creates ripples larger than we can see. To speak truth in the face of fear, to extend a hand where others turn away, to hold on when the world demands surrender. These are not grand gestures reserved for heroes, but simple choices available to all of us. And it is those choices that define not only who we are, but the kind of world we leave behind. The path ahead for anyone who has suffered is never without scars. But scars are not signs of defeat. They are evidence of survival, proof that the worst storms were not strong enough to erase a life. They remind us that endurance can be quiet yet powerful, that gentleness can be fierce, and that dignity can be reclaimed even after everything seems lost. So let this closing be not an ending, but an opening to reflection, to compassion, to the belief that even in the harshest circumstances, humanity can rise. Because in the end, what carries us forward is not the weight of what we lost, but the light of what we choose to create together. Thank you for walking through this story, for listening with your heart as much as with your ears. If its message touched you, if it stirred even a small spark of thought or emotion, I invite you to share your reflections in the comments. And if you wish to continue exploring stories like this, stories that remind us of both the fragility and the strength of the human spirit, please follow, subscribe, and stay with us on this journey. Your presence gives these stories life, and your voice keeps their echoes alive.